Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this press conference. I want to thank you for having heeded to our call at very short notice. We want to promise you that we will give you longer notices next time. As you know, the Constitutional Court declined to hear our case on its merits. Having talked for about an hour or so in the court regarding whether or not the MDC and myself as president had locus standing, the Constitutional Court declined to hear our case on two grounds only. On one ground only, actually. And the ground was that we either had to apply for declaration of the delimitation report as invalid, or we had to apply that our rights to free and fair elections were infringed. We could not, said the Constitutional Court, we could not apply on both. In other words, they said we can't say, as we had argued, that the illegality, the irregularities on the delimitation report affected our rights to free and fair election. In our view, the Constitutional Court was avoiding hearing the matter on the merits. But what the Constitutional Court did opened an avenue for us, and the avenue for us is to file the application before the High Court. We have prepared our papers, and today we are filing our application before the High Court, seeking exactly the same relief. And I want to reiterate the relief here for the sake of completeness. We argue that a declaration must be made that the delimitation report is invalid, and that number two, ZEC must be ordered to redo, and that number three, that the proclamation by the president must follow his receipt of a correct delimitation report. The issues that we raised in the Constitutional Court are exactly the same issues that we are going to raise in the High Court, and they are four. The first one is that there was no population census considered in this delimitation. We argue that it is impossible at law to do delimitation without knowledge of the population distribution. ZEC, in its delimitation last year, considered only the adult population. By adult population, we are looking at people who are above the age of 18 years. ZEC did not consider people who were 17 last year, who are now 18 this year. And that information is simply not available to us as the contesting parties. We are interested, of course, in the election in 2028, and therefore, as a party that is forward-looking, we are interested in the demographic group that is 13 years old, because those 13-year-olds will be 18 years in 2028. That information will normally be available in a regular delimitation report. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that this delimitation report is going to be alive for 10 years. It is going to govern two elections, the 2023 elections and the 2028 elections. The second issue is that the Constitution makes it very clear that there must be equality of the number of registered voters among constituencies and wards, and that any variation must never exceed 20%. In 119 out of 210 constituencies, that rule, important rule, was violated, and we have constituencies with a variance of 30%, 40%, and the outrageous one with 67%. This is a fundamental issue. And the third issue is the description of the polling stations. The polling stations, contrary to previous years, are not being described by name, but they are being described by codes. It is very easy to manipulate the election because it is incredibly difficult to remember codes. So this is a deliberate act to manipulate this election, but we have seen through it. The fourth is, of course, that the declaration by the president and his proclamation were both illegal. There were two acts that President Mnangagwa did, and the first one was to gazette the delimitation report, and the gazetted report refers to Annexure A, Annexure B, Annexure C. On the gazetted report, however, there is no Annexure A, Annexure B, Annexure C, and that presents a big problem. Why were those annexures hidden from the public? Then the second thing that the president did was to issue a proclamation that this is the delimitation report. In terms of the law, in that proclamation, he must provide the names and the boundaries of wards and constituencies. The proclamation number 1 of 2023 does not provide any name, neither does it provide any boundaries for the constituencies and wards, and that's a fundamental issue. The effect of gazetting, ladies and gentlemen, is to concretize the instrument. It is to give it the face of the law. It is to vaccinate it against any manipulation. So it must provide sufficient information. So if a proclamation does not provide sufficient information, people can always manipulate the information to which it relates. We want to invite you to look at the proclamation issued in 2008 after the delimitation report. And that proclamation in detail tells us what constitutes Highfield East, for example, what constitutes Mbare, and it describes the areas, the borders of that constituency in sufficient detail. But this proclamation number 1 of 2023 does not even give the names of the constituencies, nor does it even give the boundaries of the constituencies, and therefore it is illegal. The MDC will not rest until electoral justice is achieved in Zimbabwe. The government also has not instituted key political, social, and economic reforms, and in particular, it has not implemented those electoral reforms that were suggested by the various observer missions in 2018. These include SADC, EU, AU, Commonwealth, and various UN bodies that were interested in the election. It has not implemented the recommendations of the Moshande Commission. We also think that there are key electoral reforms that must be implemented before this election is held. And one of these key electoral reforms is to reform the bodies, the subcommittees under ZEC. ZEC is a Chapter 12 institution. It is supposed to be independent of political parties, independent of the executive, independent of the ruling party. But unfortunately, the subcommittees under ZEC, including the logistics committee, the accreditation committee, are populated by people from the executive. So you will find people from Foreign Affairs Ministry, from Home Affairs, from Ministry of Justice, and from the President's Office. It cannot be an independent body where the subcommittees under it are dominated by the executive. Ladies and gentlemen, the MDC invites Zimbabwe to understand the consequences of persisting with an unfree and unfair election. There are grave consequences. There is a grave price that Zimbabwe will pay as a nation if we allow an unfree and unfair process. Number one, international isolation will remain. This is because the international isolation of Zimbabwe is indelibly linked to the holding of free and fair elections. If you go to ZEC, one of the conditionalities under ZEC is that the nation must hold truly free and fair elections. If you go to the Commonwealth, Zimbabwe wants to join the Commonwealth, wants to be a member of the Commonwealth. One of the conditions is that you must hold high quality elections, free and fair elections. But also, an election held under these circumstances will generate a disputed result. It will generate national resentment and may generate civil strife. This is a price that Zimbabwe can ill afford. On its part, the MDC resolved yesterday, the National Standing Committee resolved to up our preparations for the elections. Our preparation for elections were actually ongoing, and our candidate selection is actually underway. And we will be presenting our list of candidates in due course. We are fielding all the candidates in all the constituencies and all the wards. We are happy that in the document that we adopted yesterday, the candidate selection document, there is emphasis on the need to come up with specific quota for women and youth. So you are going to see more women candidates in the MDC and more youth candidates in the party. Already the MDC has demonstrated that it is pro-gender. It is gender sensitive. 40% of our presidium are women, and 38% of our national executive are women. We are very close to achieving 50% gender parity. We are very happy that our political programs that we are being spearheaded by the national organizer, Dr. Benevolence Taisekwa. Very few people know that this young man is a PhD candidate, and he has led the renaissance of the MDC, the rejuvenation, the revival of the MDC. And we have held the presidential interface meetings in Chitungwiza, Manicaland, Masvingo, Midlands North, Midlands South, Mashonaland East, West and Central, Harare and Bulawayo. And these meetings were well attended, and we are very, very happy. We are left with Matabeleland North and Matabeleland South. But after that, we will unveil yet another political program. Our aim is to win this election, and as we have said before, our aim is to win a free and fair election, including the presidential election. Our agenda for Zimbabwe is summarized as follows. What we are offering to the people of Zimbabwe: we offer free education and educational support. Free education for people, for pupils from grade 1 to Form 4. And thereafter, we will offer loans and we will issue bursaries and scholarships for students who excel. But we also issue student loans and grants to students who need them. So there is no child under our administration who will not be able to go to school because they are indigent or because their parents are poor. We also offer free access to health, especially for the poor and the downtrodden. We believe as the MDC that giving birth is a national duty, and therefore we offer free maternity health care. We are concerned about employment in Zimbabwe, the level of unemployment in Zimbabwe. We are going to be emphasizing on attracting investments from throughout the globe. The MDC believes that Zimbabwe is a friend of the world. We are neither going to look east, nor west, nor north, nor south. Zimbabwe are going to look everywhere. Our government will look everywhere. As the Chinese former president Deng Xiaoping said, we don't care the color of the cat as long as it catches mice. As long as the investment is coming from a legitimate source, we welcome all investment, and we are going to de-racialize investment in Zimbabwe. We also will offer large subsidies for agricultural inputs. The prices of fertilizer, the prices of chemicals are such that ordinary people cannot afford. We want to subsidize so that we knock down the prices so that our people can afford. Zimbabwe is an agricultural country, and we want to lead the agricultural renaissance. We are also going to offer interest-free loans for small businesses, targeting mainly women and the youth. And these loans will be administered through designated banks and institutions. And the procedures of accessing the loans are going to be made deliberately simple so that our people are able to access these loans so that they participate in business. Our aim in this regard is to revive the economy of the country via the small sector. You may want to know that countries like the United States, Britain, and other Western advanced economies raised their economies on the basis of small businesses, and we are going to follow suit. We have instructed our team led by Dr. Msevenzi and our policy secretary to look at particularly how to tackle corruption, and we have asked them to study the Asian tigers, the Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, on how they specifically dealt with corruption, save of course for the death penalty. We are not going to impose a death penalty, but the issues of detection, the issues of deterrent sentences when it comes to issues of corruption. We also offer pension reform. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, our people, our pensioners are living in abject poverty. The pensions are such that people cannot sustain themselves. We are going to revise these, and probably, in all probability, we are going to recalibrate the pensions so that we increase the social protection of our people. We believe, as the MDC, we believe as the Social Democratic Party, that Zimbabwe can only develop following social democracy. And that is why we have perfected social democracy with its values, the values of freedom, justice, equality, solidarity, constitutionalism, and the rule of law. We hope to avail our policy document soon, as well as our manifesto. Yes, we persist as the MDC that this was a political judgment. It was a political judgment in the sense that we were treated very differently from other litigants previously who were in the same situation with us. And one such litigant was Jelas Mawarire. Jelas Mawarire, as you know, brought an action in 2013 to force the government then to declare election dates. And he argued that he was a Zimbabwean citizen, he was a registered voter, and he had an interest in the election being held. Fast forward to 2023, I raised the issue that the delimitation report was invalid and would affect our election preparations. I am a Zimbabwean citizen, I am a registered voter, I am a leader of my party. I have presided over a party which has since 1999 participated in the elections. But the judges spend a lot of time questioning my locus standi. And at one time I actually wanted to stand up in court and say, if I don't have locus standi, tell me what type of Zimbabwean will have locus standi. Jelas Mawarire was allowed to appear before the court and argue his case. I was called to the court but not allowed to argue my case. The second thing is that the judges specifically allowed our application for direct access. In other words, we knocked to the Supreme Court and they agreed to allow us to argue before them the substantive issues of the case. They were satisfied as regards my locus standi. They were satisfied regard my course of action. They even made a remark that the case was strong. But when the day of the court came, we were not allowed to argue on the merits. The judges spent quite a lot of time harassing the lawyers regarding locus standi. At one point in time, they even asked for MDC supporters to be identified, for MDC candidates to be identified, a standard that has not been extended to anybody. So definitely we were treated unfairly. And after what they did, they then, having found that the issue of locus standi was not sustainable, it was not decent to invoke that in this case, they then came and said, well, Mr. Mwonzora, you should choose whether to say the delimitation report is invalid. But if you do that, then end there. Don't say the delimitation report is invalid, and as a result of invalidity, my rights are affected. Don't say that. Don't talk about your political rights being affected. And that amounted to emasculation. There is no better illustration that this was a political judgment. And there is a written rule in our constitution that when it comes to constitutional matters, the judges must not rely on technicalities. They must go to the substance of the matter. Zimbabweans wanted to know whether their delimitation report was valid or not. That was the fundamental issue. And maybe some people had to be protected, we don't know, but for some strange reason, the judges refused to hear us on the merits. They agreed to hear someone else. Now, what is the difference between Douglas Mwonzora and Jealous Warire? We are both Zimbabweans, we are both registered voters, we are both interested in our country. Jealous Warire was ZANU-PF, I am MDC. So if somebody who is ZANU-PF and another one who is MDC are treated differently, then that's politics. That's discrimination on political grounds. So we maintain, and we think that our criticism of the Constitutional Court on this point is well grounded and it is within our rights. We are not being contemptuous of them, but we are criticizing them under the freedom of expression rank of the Constitution. We filed this application as two applicants, Chengetai. The first applicant was myself, in my capacity as an individual and in my capacity as president of the MDC. The second applicant was the MDC-T, not the MDC Alliance or any other derivative. The reason for that, Shegetai, is that only legal persons appear before courts. Regarding me as a legal person, there's no problem. But regarding the MDC as a legal person, for you to be a legal person, you must have a constitution. So the MDC has a constitution. The MDC Alliance doesn't have a constitution. And therefore the MDC Alliance is not a legal person. That is why you saw parties who are not legal persons, parties who have no constitutions, had actually to subcontract the so-called amicus to come via the back door to spite our application. It is because they had a problem on whether they can appear before courts or not. Are you winning the election? Yes, of course, we are going to win the election. We are going to win free and fair elections in this country. You are saying you are not seeing us. Chengetai, we have been tweeting week in, week out. Our information team have been showing you the activities that the MDC is doing. And we dare say that there was no, in the past few weeks, there was no more active party than ourselves. And the meetings were well attended. We can share the pictures with you should you want, and you can verify where these meetings were held. Yes, we will win free and fair elections. And it is going to boil down, this election is going to boil down on the quality of the candidates. I don't believe I am of lower quality than Emerson Mnangagwa. I don't believe I'm of lower quality than Nelson Chamisa, both intellectually and physically. I don't think we are inferior at all. We compete quite favorably as the MDC, and I think a lot is going to depend on what we offer. And the MDC is the only party that is offering something of substance. Other political parties will tell you that change is coming. What type of change, they don't say, and so on. We are offering concrete things. And when the time for debate comes, and I hope we are going to be allowed to debate as presidential candidates. I am challenging all presidential candidates to a public debate. Zimbabwe needs to know the quality of its leaders and so on. So we compare favorably. Many people have joined the ZEC and so on. Well, many people are joining many things. Many people have joined the MDC-a. What we don't do is we don't go to the mountain and say so and so has joined us. They were councillors from the ZEC, including Councillor Chunga in Bulawayo, who moved from the ZEC to the MDC. There are a number of people in the ZEC who were encouraging me to persist with the application, and who are encouraging me to persist with the application to the extent of offering financial help. They are there. There are people from the ZEC who have gone to ZANU-PF. There are people from the MDC who have gone to ZANU-PF. There are ZANU-PF people who have expressed sympathy with the MDC. It is happening everywhere. So we don't care about an MP who chooses to contest under the ZEC ticket. They are allowed in terms of the constitution to exercise their rights and so on. So we will have candidates. We do have candidates, and of better quality for that matter, who are going to be contesting the elections. For example, Shakespeare Amauswa is from Warren Park. He has gone to ZEC. In his place, we have Dr. Julius Msevens, trading quality for better quality, I dare say. So we do not have inferiority at all. In fact, these people who are leaving are making way for candidates who were not known. Taisekwa is going to be contesting, I don't know with who, but I know that he is better quality and so on. This issue about the movements that are happening within the political parties, I think it is too early for you to say, because there are movements which are going to happen from many political parties. Rutendo, the candidate selection exercise, first of all, we have a document of rules and regulations first, and that document was yesterday adopted by the National Standing Committee, produced by the Elections Directorate, and this sets the qualifications of people to stand as candidates. For example, you should have spent 5 years in the party, unless the Elections Directorate exercises discretion and gives a special dispensation to a candidate. The other rule is that, just as an example, that the provinces are going to receive the applications. They are going to vet the applications, but they can't disqualify an applicant. But they can add a note on the application form that this one we are not recommending. It is the Elections Directorate that will then say this candidate is not allowed. If we have more than one candidate in the constituency or ward, we have two processes. The first process is consensus building, where we encourage the candidates to persuade one another to give each other a chance. So we encourage discussion among the candidates so that they give each other a chance. And where they agree, the candidate that has dropped will automatically become a campaign, a member of the campaign team of the successful candidate. But if consensus doesn't happen, then we will hold primary elections. So unlike other parties, we are not going to impose candidates. But we also know that we may do candidate selection before the finalization of the case in court. If the case comes in our favor, then there will be movement in the constituencies, and our rules make provision for that. That if there has been a change in the constituencies, we will look the extent to which that change has happened, and we will revise the candidate selection accordingly. The elections directorate will then come in and rectify the situation. We will be able to share the regulations with you, members of the press. When should we finish our candidate selection? We have given them a deadline, the elections directorate, that is, to complete this process by a certain date, and we will advise you of that date. Tatenda, you raise a question that if the High Court does not find favor with our application, what are we going to do? Well, we don't budget for failure. We are not even thinking about that. We are going to win before the High Court. We will succeed. Our case is impeccable. We don't want to think in failure terms. But when the situation comes, we will cross the bridge when we come to it. My favorite quotation in that regard on what we will do when faced with an adverse situation in the future, my favorite quotation is from Lenin. And he says, we cannot prescribe a method of struggle. Every method will depend on the circumstances that exist at that time. So when that eventuality presents itself, we will make a determination. And right now, we are concentrating on winning our case. We are concentrating on presenting an impeccable case. And we are concentrating on representing Zimbabwe so that it has free and fair elections. I'm very happy to say lies have short legs. You know, there was so much propaganda against us as the MDC and against me as a person for the past 3 years. People trying to mischaracterize me, trying to bring national resentment towards my person. But we are very flattered that despite all that barrage, all that hatred, we still remain standing. And we are flattered to think that our brand must have been very strong to withstand all this unfairness. Now, for you to know whether a person is a proxy of ZANU-PF, you watch their actions. Now, first of all, I did not prepare the delimitation report. I did not perform the outrageous errors that were made by ZEC. It's not me who did that. It's not me who ignored a population. It's not me who miscalculated 20%. It's not me who failed to declare properly and proclaim properly. It is not me. It is not me who performed these acts that are being complained of. And those people who did that, we took them to court. And for your information, the respondents in my court application were the Zimbabwe Election Commission, President Mnangagwa, his Minister of Justice. Those were people that I sued in the Constitutional Court. How can I sue my friends? How can I sue people whom I am working with? Does that make sense? But who supported Mnangagwa, who supported ZEC, who supported Ziyambi in the Constitutional Court, those people who send a proxy, an agent to represent them, they were arguing against our application. And guess what they were saying? They were saying they wanted a postponement by 1 month, but the election must go on using the delimitation report that we were challenging. So what more evidence that does anybody want of collusion than clear evidence of people going to show up a case in which we are fighting the state and ZANU-PF? So with the fullness of time, the truth is going to come out. And remember that labeling somebody ZANU-PF is a weapon of choice. Now, if I was ZANU-PF and if I had been instructed to delay the elections, why did they not allow me to win? Why did they not let me win? Now, there is your answer. Those were false allegations. Right now, we are fighting against an unfair delimitation, and some people are actually helping the state that we should go to an election irrespective of the quality of its fairness and unfairness. A genuine political party always fights for electoral reform. A genuine political party always fights for evening of the electoral field. And I want to end again on this point, Chengetai. If I was sent by ZANU-PF, if I was sent by Mnangagwa, who wielded so much power, why did they not allow me to win? Why was I blocked from arguing my case on its merit? So this issue, we always hear it in the Twitters and so on by people who have nothing else to say. And let me just say, this is not the first time that I'm challenging government. At the age of 25 in 1998, I approached the Supreme Court and argued that the election of 1995 will not be free and fair with the current Electoral Act, which provided for the power of the president to appoint the Electoral Supervisory Commission, the Delimitation Commission, the Registrar General, and so on. He provided everything. And I challenged that election in 1995 at the age of 25. I was unsuccessful on account, of course, that I was not experienced enough, or that the judges did not want to embarrass President Mugabe then. In 1997, I went back to the Supreme Court, a constitutional court at that time, arguing on the constitutionality of the Political Parties Finances Act. I had perfected my act and I succeeded. And this year I am challenging the delimitation report. Don't you find similar fact evidence, similar fact historical evidence that I am not manipulable, that I follow my conscience? Remember, I am one of the authors of the Constitution, and you don't become that if you are as manipulable as people say. 2008 boundaries, Rutendo, thank you for that very important question. ZEC had been prepared in the papers that if we succeeded on the merits, we should go back to 2008. There are 4 reasons why we can't go back to 2008. Number 1, 2008 delimitation boundary is 15 years old. So you cannot resort to boundaries which are 15 years old because they are patently wrong. Number 2, the delimitation report done in 2008 was done by a different authority. I think it was the Delimitation Commission, and Tobayo they had a lot of influence on it. So going back means that you have a voters roll by ZEC and boundaries by Mudede in one election. So if you want the Mudede things, you may as well say voters roll by Mudede and the delimitation by MUDED. You can't mix both. Then number 3, the 2008 delimitation report was held under the old constitution, and bringing it back means reviving the old constitution. So for the period of the election, Zimbabwe will have 2 constitutions, all in force, the previous constitution and the current constitution. And that is very undesirable, because in a constitution you have related clauses and so on. So you have 2 constitutions operating at one point in time. Then number 4, in terms of section 1616, I think of the constitution, all delimitations except the first delimitation must consider old boundaries. Stated in other words, in respect to other delimitations, old boundaries are relevant. In respect of the first delimitation, old boundaries are irrelevant. Now, it so happens that the first delimitation is this delimitation. The Constitution says old boundaries are irrelevant. So you can't say in one breath they are irrelevant and then you say we are going to use them. So it doesn't make sense. So going back to 2008 was not an option. Those people who were arguing for 2008, going back to 2008, were actually advocating for a postponement, because assuming that the judges had on the 8th of May said let's go to the 2008 boundaries, the president was duty bound by the constitution to proclaim again, to say Zimbabwe, we are going to go to elections using 2008 boundaries. He was duty bound to give 6 months notice. So 6 months to run from the 8th of May would have pushed the election somewhere close to December. So we are accused of trying to postpone the election. Yet 3 political parties who were involved in this election wanted, one way or the other, a postponement. The Triple C through Jeremiah Bamu wanted 1 month notice postponement. Mnangagwa group would have wanted 6 months, at least 6 months postponement, by the very suggestion that we go to 2008. We simply said as the MDC that proclamation must follow a new delimitation. So the 3 people, the 3 political parties were arguing basically the same. And why do you pick on the MDC only? So I think there is a lot of pretense in this country, but of course going to 2008 is not possible. Our application, our relief is in 3 parts. The first part is that declare the delimitation report invalid. Number 2, ZEC must redo the delimitation report. In other words, we envisage a creation of another delimitation report which complies with the law. It is that delimitation report that we will hold elections under if we succeed. Any other proposition doesn't make sense at all. Not necessarily, Chenge, because we don't know what point the Constitutional Court will uphold, the High Court will uphold. They may uphold the issue of the census. So we don't know when the census results will be availed. Maybe they will be availed next week. Maybe, because Zimbabwe had a census last year in April. And up to now, the results are not yet out. We don't know why, but obviously the results must be hanging somewhere in some office somewhere. So the results may be made available this week, in which case ZEC starts using them. Or if they upward the 20%, it's a question of just going back to those tables, do what is called iteration, and things are done. It's not a long-term issue at all. It is very, very doable. But we want to emphasize that the MDC is not going to give up until we achieve electoral justice in this country.
Chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto marongera vanoita wepanyika vanoda kuti vamwe tioneswe moto dai pasina kupindira kwaishe chokwadi pasi pano taiona moto